Alright, I forgot to start recording because this went so fast and I was uploading other recordings, but we got a little plus 11 Underrot just for getting weekly heroics, what is this, mythics done for the heroic cache. And yeah, it's getting a little late, so I'm just kind of trying to find a chill, easy slam group. No friends with us on this run, so maybe I'll try to give a little bit of commentary or talk about something. I don't know. What should we talk about? Balanced Druid, maybe? How are we feeling about it? Yeah, I've been enjoying it so far. The tier bonus from last season was a lot more interesting than this season. I actually don't even know off the top of my head what the Balanced Druid tier bonus is. We're getting a little lost. It's Tyrannical and it's a boss. But yeah, missing, and I only really mention it because that tier bonus like just felt really good to use. Like just getting free spenders. I don't know. It flowed really well. It was really powerful, and losing it definitely didn't feel great. So that kind of sucks. But you know, balance is still pretty good. Uh, yeah, I don't know. Overall, I'm pretty happy with it. And it's always nice, like, of the healing specs that I'm sort of maining at the moment, being Resto Druid and Holy Priest, just feel a little more comfortable in Resto Druid just because I played a little bit more, and I don't know, it just feels nicer. I did play Holy Priest for the first time, not the first time, but like in like a real key earlier this evening. The video for that one's probably up already, actually. And that went fine. There wasn't, I don't think ever any point where we like struggled in particular because of me being on a class that I wasn't like super comfortable with. And not even that I'm like that uncomfortable with it. Like I'd played Holy Priest all throughout Season 3, last expansion, and for you know what I did, what healing I did do in Season 4 was also Holy Priest for the most part. Yeah, so you know it still comes back. There's a bunch of new abilities, and like the talent trees definitely shook things up, but overall, yeah, it still feels pretty fine. Um, yeah, I don't know what else. Been yeah, I've been kind of like settling a little bit into like playstyle wise and like what I'm trying to play. I've really liked the healers. Sorry, I should say the meta DPS classes that have a healing spec. That is kind of like where I'm like min-maxing my enjoyment of the game the most, because it's kind of a priority list. Like number one priority is if the boys and girls are on and we're down to do keys, like doing keys together, that is 100% number one, the most enjoyable thing, like by far and away. Like it doesn't matter what level key we're doing, just doing it together is that just trumps everything. And more often than not, what we need is a healer. So being able to fill that role, that way we can actually play together, is essential. I'm actually going to take just a moment here and set a reminder on my phone because I have something I need to do after I'm done with this. So that is going to be there. Okay. As I'm getting slammed by things. Hopefully I'm not getting flamed too much. But yeah, so number one enjoyment thing, most important thing is being able to like do group content in World of Warcraft. And the best way to make sure that group content can be done is to make sure that somebody can heal. And somebody's comfortable healing, like, because sometimes the content we want to do is actually pretty challenging. So you don't want to have somebody who's not experienced healing just jumping in, because like it is a little dicey sometimes, and like there are parts in challenging content where it's solely up to you as the healer to make sure that everyone lives, which is good, right? Like that's enjoyable and like a good reason to play a healer, and it's what makes healing fun, ultimately. But yeah, if you are not A of all not comfortable healing, and B of all not familiar with where those checks are, that's just not a good place. So, I'm happy to be the person to kind of take up that mantle as needed. Now that said, what I've found, because I healed pretty much exclusively throughout Shadowlands, but what I found is that oh fuck, why did you do it that way? The DPS role is definitely way more fun, just in general. That's shouldn't come as any kind of a surprise to anyone who's played this game. I enjoy it way more. It's way more fun, and like way more fun too. Viewing it through the mindset of somebody who has kind of been maining healer for a little while, because you just have a much better idea of how your contributions as a DPS player can go towards just completing the key. Because that's something that's really cool about Mythic Plus, right? In Raid, as a DPS player, you can pretty much get away with just single target focus. Like, I'm just going to tunnel vision, do DPS. Like, I don't need to worry about survivability. I don't need to worry about mechanics in most cases. But that's not the case with these dungeons, right? Like, the group living for certain things is a real bottleneck in a lot of cases. In a lot of cases, it's the main thing that's keeping people from completing higher level content. So, if as a DPS player, you can be conscious of that and be part of that conversation, so to speak, then yeah, that's super engaging and super fun. I'm gonna use this new trinket that I got the other day in the Mega Dungeon. So yeah, basically that way of playing DPS is pretty fantastic to me. So that's my preferred like thing to do if I have a choice. Like if it's up to me, all other things equal, like we're playing as a group or I'm playing solo, like I want a DPS. That's my preference. So that's the second thing. So that's where the meta DPS portion of what I'm playing comes into play, because like yeah, I want my main like primary role to be a DPS, and I want it to be a good DPS. I think it's perfectly acceptable to be somewhat of a meta chasing class or like a player, because everyone says like play what you enjoy in WoW, and I completely agree with them. But uh, enjoying, being the meta DPS class is also a valid reason or a valid thing to enjoy. Uh, just it does come with a bit of a learning curve, right? Like you have to learn a new class, which honestly, like that's kind of an appeal. Hey, I like up until this expansion, never really I just never really enjoyed Balanced Druid. Like I tried it kind of here and there, but never really like gave it the full, um, attention it deserved to like try it out as a spec. And then yeah, come this expansion, like I just found myself playing it because it was a good DPS class, and I needed a healer that wasn't Holy Paladin. So it just kind of worked out that way. And then yeah, sure enough, I took a few runs and a little bit of like a week or so of studying, learning, adding like different levels of complexity, but eventually, yeah, I just got a hang of it, and so now I'm very comfortable on it. So yeah, I think it's totally acceptable to want to just like play a meta DPS class and increase your enjoyment that way. Yeah, so then that's how I kind of arrived on that as like a criteria for how I want to enjoy the game. And yeah, so with those two things in mind, like wanting to play a good DPS class that I do enjoy, because that is also part of it too. Like I'm not going to just, I'll give a new spec or class its fair due before I kind of like make a determination on it. But if I like, pick up Enhancement Shaman, for example, and just do not enjoy it after giving it, a week's worth of doing keys, then, I'm not going to force it. There's other options too. So yeah, the sweet spot is really meta DPS class that has a healing aspect, because the second part to that is getting back to my primary reason for enjoying the game and wanting to play the game is just needing to have somebody to fill the role of healer. And I think for the most part, like there's never been a portion in recent history in WoW with the level that I'm playing the game where you couldn't just play whatever healer you wanted, or really any DPS class for that matter, any class, and still just be able to do the content. So picking the right healer, quote unquote, is like 0% of what matters for the primary enjoyment of the game for me, which is being able to fulfill the healing role when we have 5 people together, right? So with that in mind, it frees me up to say like, all right, well, what's the best DPS class that just has a healing spec? Because like I don't really care too much about that healing spec. I'll just play whatever it is to fill that role, and then have my main kind of be like the powerful DPS class that I'm really enjoying. So yeah, it just makes a lot of sense. And then yeah, what we wound up with was balanced Druid, and then kind of had enough time to gear up an alt, and Shadow Priest, excuse me, is definitely a meta class at the moment. And it was a long time priest main during WAD, Legion, BFA. Well, not so much BFA. WAD and Legion for sure. So I was like, all right, it's time to bring the priest back. I always kind of had a soft spot for it. And hey, if Shadow's good, like I gotta at least give it a shot, because it was a long time Shadow main. Yeah, so that's how I wound up trying to priest out. And again, the priest right now is like a perfect example of what I was just talking about. Holy as a spec is not particularly interesting. It's very kind of basic. The DPS options are not only bland, but also just kind of like weird, and I don't know. I don't even know how to really describe it, but it's just not like a spec that I would choose to play all other things equal. But the fact that it's attached to a DPS spec that is A of all an incredible meta spec, very powerful right now, and B of all like actually really enjoyable. I think with where they got Shadow at this point in the expansion is fantastic. Shadow Crash being on like a 25-second cooldown is honestly like that was the biggest, most important change they made in my opinion. That was huge. That and Mind Spike, Mind Flay being a choice, I think that should have been in the game a long time ago. But I digress. The point is, I've landed on the meta DPS classes with the healing spec. Doesn't matter what the healing spec is or how good it is. And then go from there. So with all that in mind, I kind of like came up with this mantra in my head the other night when I was brushing my teeth, going to bed, and was just thinking about it. I was like, Resto Shaman like fulfills this idea like so perfectly, and it's kind of a shame that I've sort of let my Shaman kind of not like rot, but like not kind of given it a fair shot with that in mind. Enhancement is definitely a meta spec at the moment. It is very good in melee comps, and just in general, I think it brings a lot of good utility to the table. And Resto Shaman has been like the second best healer, whatever that even means. Like second most popular, I should say, I guess, when it comes to like high keys for like 2 expansions now, which is kind of hilarious. It's just never quite good enough, but it's really fun to play. Like before they gave everybody interrupts, not everybody obviously, but they gave a lot more healer classes interrupts. Like Shaman being an interrupt class was just fantastic. Being able to fulfill that role in a dungeon group was super cool. So there may be some shamaning in my future. We'll see if any shaman vids show up on the channel. And then like I've been sort of resurrecting my rogue a little bit as well, because really enjoy playing rogue. But rogue unfortunately doesn't have a healing spec, believe it or not. So that's kind of, so it's not like that it's out of the question. Like there's still certainly opportunities where I could play my rogue, but as we have more friends returning to the game at the moment, it just makes more sense to kind of pick that class that can heal if needed. Because the other thing too is like, as we're getting friends coming back to the game and trying to gear them up, we oh wow, that augmentation evoker was blasting. I didn't realize we had an augmentation. Yeah, as friends are coming back, we want to like try to gear them up, and you don't want to be the guy who's like trying to like gear up an alt as you're trying to gear up the mains of your friends. Like that's just not a good place to be. So it's nice to be able to pick a class that you can just always play no matter what when you're helping your friends out. You can do DPS, you can do healing. So that's, and then just be overpowered so that like stuff is just easier as they're kind of learning and easing back into the game and getting stuff figured out. Yeah, so I don't know, maybe just take a look at this real quick. I certainly wasn't playing optimally here, but what is this? DPS taken by ability. There's a little like evoker mouse over thing here. That's kind of neat. How much we did a bunch of moonfires, starfires. Yeah, it's Tyrannical week. It is what it is. How much healing did my spore cloak do? A bunch of overhealing. Yeah, there's definitely a world where you swap this off for the lower keys, but whatever, doesn't matter. All right, well, that's that one. I'm gonna try to get one more dungeon in before bed because I'm at 3 out of 4 here, and this is kind of the last evening I have for about a week to realistically get some dungeons in. So yeah, I'm gonna go do that and record another one of these. Bye.